Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to spite somebody. And in today's episode, we've got bad Karen bosses, evil stepmothers, Karen customers, and entitled hospital patients all getting taught lessons they'll never forget. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So here's some background. I suffer from migraines, and unfortunately when I get one, they tend to last 3 to 4 days, leaving me completely incapacitated and unable to do anything more than lie in bed in my dark room and cry and vomit. So this means when I get one, I basically know straight away that I'm not going to be able to do anything for the next few days. It's just how it's always been. With that said, I have a casual retail job in addition to my full-time job, which I've had for almost 20 years. I was always the one who worked extra hard and stepped up to do extra shifts, or stayed back when someone else couldn't come in. The department manager we had at the time of the story was a narcissist who got off on bullying staff. Now, I didn't know at the time they were called Karens, but she totally was one. She also really disliked me, as I often stood up for myself and others. And the funniest part is that she always loved to stand over people to intimidate them. But with me it failed miserably because I was about half a foot taller than her. About 15 years ago, I started to get a migraine in the middle of the day, before I was meant to have a shift starting at 5 p.m. Knowing I wouldn't be able to work the following day, I called the manager to let her know that I would not be able to come in, thinking it would give her plenty of notice to find a replacement. And this is her response. She says, "You can't call in sick the day before your shift. You don't know that you'll be sick tomorrow. If you're really sick tomorrow, then you can call in." At that I thought, okay, fine. So I went to bed, dosed up on painkillers, and I woke up at 10 a.m. feeling like a railroad spike had been driven through my eye socket. So I called up again, and this time the manager said, "Your shift doesn't start for another 7 hours. You're just trying to get out of work. You'll be fine by 5 o'clock, so I'm not going to replace you yet." I just thought, alright. I went back to bed because I was so wiped out, and I didn't wake up until around 3:30. We're supposed to give 2 hours notice, so at this point, it was half an hour too late. Or it would have been if I hadn't already given notice twice previously. Anyways, I was still in no shape to even get to work, let alone work. So I call up for a third time and ask to speak to the manager again, and she wasn't happy. She basically screams at me and says, "You've only given me an hour and a half notice. That's not enough. You'd better show up to work." At that I tell her, "I've told you twice over the last 2 days that I would not be able to come in." At this point, I literally had to stop and be sick. I then said to her, "I can't come in. You've known that since yesterday." She then says, "If you're not at work at 5 p.m., I'm going to make sure you don't get any extra shifts when I write the schedule." And this is when I decided to be maliciously compliant, even though I hadn't heard of that term back then. I asked my mother to drive me to work, and she asked if I was really that spiteful to go to work sick just to make a point. And I told her, well, yes, I am that spiteful. So I got to work, clocked in, and then went and sat in the fitting room under a bench instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing. My coworkers were absolutely horrified, asking me what the heck I was doing there in that condition. I told them I tried calling in sick, but manager Karen had threatened to stop giving me shifts if I didn't show up. And these colleagues were great. One brought me a glass of water and another one let me borrow her sunglasses, so I could try to cut out some of that bright shop light. About half an hour later, the manager came in. She saw I wasn't doing any work, and she bent down so she could scream in my face. And that's when I leaned forward and I threw up all over her shoes. Now at this point, I could have held it in until I was able to get a bucket of some sort, but I decided to let her have it instead. Well, she went absolutely nuclear and she starts screaming even harder. She says, "Why would you even come to work like this? You should have stayed home. You owe me new shoes, blah blah blah." I was feeling so sick and miserable, and her screeching was making the pain worse. So I started crying, and I ended up being sick all over the floor. As she stormed off, my colleagues called the store manager over, who was immediately horrified that I was at work in that condition. He called my mom to come collect me, and he said that manager would be sternly talked to. My coworkers later told me that he ripped her a new one. When I got back to work 2 days later, she pretty much pretended I didn't exist. And not long afterwards, we all learned that she was transferred to a different store. I never saw her again. Honestly, guys, I think we can all agree, F bosses like that, right? And Karen must have not ever had or known anyone who's had migraines because they can get really, really bad. Like, it's way more than just pop an aspirin and come to work kind of thing. With that said, I hope that getting transferred to another store meant that she was demoted and stripped of the management position, like using her position of power to threaten sick employees, saying they won't be scheduled for shifts anymore, and then point blank yelling at them in front of staff, like the store manager should have fired her on the spot for that. And guys, I'm not gonna lie, OP throwing up all over her shoes was super satisfying. That's what you get. I had a boss once who told me not to tell him how to put a computer together because, quote, he already knows how and I don't need your unsolicited advice. Okay. Also, strap yourselves in for the background. I'm a woman in the tech industry. Do you see where this is going? Now, not only was I a tech at this place, but I was the tech. I was basically the person who all the techs came to for advice and help. I was the one who trained 80% of the techs, had the highest numbers in the district, and top 10 in the territory, but I always went by my last name. So everybody who wasn't physically in my store thought I was a male. Due to circumstances, we end up getting a new manager from another store out of state, the Karen of the story. His first day was on my day off. My coworkers told me that he wanted 2 hours with each of us to learn our thoughts on diagnosing issues, and he was really eager to learn from us. He was especially interested to meet me and to learn from the top tech who he and everyone had heard about in his previous store, until he learned I was a woman. The guy did 2-hour sessions with all the other techs but me. He always went to the male techs with questions. He tried to make me work the counter to just check computers in, when I was one of only 3 full-time repair techs and we had 7 counter techs. He tried to make me do all of his paperwork on several occasions. He also started trying to repair computers by himself, to avoid me touching any hardware, even though that wasn't a part of his job. He would leave computers half repaired with no notes, and then he would write up whatever tech he thought should pick up where he left off. The whole team hated him, and they start making remarks saying, well, OP could have fixed this if you asked her. Or, I think OP fixed something similar in an hour, and you've been at this for like 2 days. Those phrases started to piss him off, that a woman knew more than him. And this was the perfect setup to one of my most favorite moments in my career. The manager got it in his head that he was gonna do something to prove that he knew his stuff. So when a customer came in wanting to build a custom-built computer, which we weren't supposed to do, the guy grabbed the opportunity. He helped the guy pick out the parts, compare prices, and sold him the labor to put it all together. He also told me that he was gonna build it in my repair space, and he was doing this alone, and that I will never forget this. The guy told me, don't tell me how to do this, let me learn. And I thought to myself, oh, I will. Cue the manager putting this machine together on the bench behind me, while I continued my work, just waiting. The manager has it all together and he hits the power switch. The computer turns on and then off, and then on and then off again. He unplugs it and then takes it apart. He puts it together again, same result. I can hear the wheels turning behind me, but he told me not to give him advice because my advice is useless to him. So I just kept working with my mouth shut. Let him ask me when he's good and ready is what I thought. He then believes the parts must be bad. So he has the customer send the parts back and they wait for new ones and then they'd try again. The same result, and this continues for 2 whole months. He has the customer, who's obviously very angry at this point, send every single part back. And then he had a whole new set of parts delivered. He then promised the customer that this is the last time, that this time it'll work. He definitely knows what he's doing. So the day arrives where the customer brings in the parts. The manager's there and I'm there. I stop repairing computers as he puts the final part in. I then lean against my bench to watch what's about to happen, because how could I not? The guy hits the power button and same result, and he's furious. He throws the screwdriver across the bench, denting the wall, and he curses so loudly that the customer heard. He puts his hands on either side of the machine, with his head down, shoulders slumped, and the guy looks utterly defeated. In a quiet, oh so quiet voice, he asked, OP, what's wrong with it? That's when I tell him the motherboard and processor aren't compatible without a BIOS update. He then says to me, well, how long have you known this? That's when I tell him, since you first turned it on 2 months ago. He then turns and he's red in the face, his veins are bulging, and I'm pretty sure he thought about decking me for a second before composing himself with a very, very deep breath. He then says to me, why didn't you say anything then? Me, smiling sweetly, say, because you told me not to. You told me to let you learn, so have you learned? Hearing me say that, he lost it. The guy storms off and out of the store. He ends up taking 2 personal days, and I end up building a new PC that actually worked. The customer was cool once I explained everything. That's a story that ends up being the legendary story to tell all the new techs. I left the company a few months later for a higher paying job. The manager tried to get me to stay, and that manager ends up getting fired due to my GM believing that he was the reason for my leaving. I never corrected that perspective. After all, how else will he learn? Guys, this malicious compliance was absolutely amazing, and the manager getting fired in the end was the cherry on top. Like, what an idiot. And guys, it always baffles me when I read stories like this. Like, there's a reason OP was considered the top tech. Like, I'm pretty sure anyone can be super knowledgeable at anything if they put the time and effort into learning about it. Again, the cherry on top was that he was let go because the GM thought he was the reason his best tech left. I do hope he learned a lesson. So this happened today, and my brother and I are still laughing about it, while Gabrielle, my stepmother, and my dad are not. They're embarrassed. Dad came into town to visit my brother, Mark, and me for a few days, and he brought Gabrielle with him. Now, Gabrielle does have her good traits, but she has this one really nasty trait. She's notoriously picky and critical when it comes to food. You know, the stereotypical snooty, rude French character in movies and books who always complains, that's not how it's done in France. She's this way when it comes to food. Going out to eat with her is embarrassing. The woman constantly sends back food, and she's insistent on food being made a certain way, and she always demands certain things done a certain way. One time, she asked the waiter to bring some mustard to the table, and not even 2 minutes later, she calls him back because, quote, the mustard's old. Bring us a new unopened bottle. More than once, I've had to apologize to the waitstaff on my family's behalf, and I told the manager that I'll vouch for them should Gabrielle leave a bad review on their site. She's made waiters and managers cry. She's that bad. Honestly, I have no idea why Dad puts up with her when she does that, even though I know he's just as embarrassed as Mark and I are. We only chalk it up to Gabrielle having a magical hoo-ha. With that said, when they got here yesterday, for some reason, they insisted they wanted to go out to dinner. Dad recommends our new favorite diner, which is known for its breakfast at any time of the day. We live close to a major interstate, and the saying about truckers knowing all the best diners in all 50 states and then some is true. It's a greasy spoon in every sense of the word. Right out of the 1950s, every leather booth is filled up with truckers or locals. The waitresses know their regulars' orders by heart, and they don't put up with crap from anybody. The bustling kitchen, while spotless, is worn enough to let you know how many people have been there. In other words, this place has character. Now, it may not look like a 5-star restaurant, but it's got some of the best breakfast you're ever going to eat. I was hesitant to take Gabrielle there, only for the fact that I don't want to ruin the staff's day. Mark and I have been there enough times that the waitstaff and cooks know us. However, Dad wants Gabrielle to experience a true American classic, and he was offering to pay, so reluctantly we went. Luckily, we got there during a not-so-busy time, so I told Dad to find a parking spot and I would go inside to get us a table. The reason I did this was so I could warn the staff about Gabrielle and apologize in advance for anything she did. Fortunately, our usual waitress, who we'll call Mary, thanked me for the warning, and she warned the rest of the staff. So we go inside and get our booth, and Gabrielle tries pulling her usual stunts. Now, I won't go into everything she did because we'll be here forever, but I do have a highlight reel. Number 1. Gabrielle sent Mary back 3 times with the coffee because, in order, it was too cold, it was too hot, there was not enough cream. Finally, Mary, who doesn't let anyone push her around, just slaps the coffee pot on the table, along with the cream and sugar, and told Gabrielle to make do because she wasn't going back to get her damn coffee. This did make Mark and I chuckle and Gabrielle steam. Number 2. While waiting, and probably still stewing from Mary's little comeback with coffee, Gabrielle decides to accost Stephanie, who had just started, and tell her to get some fresh biscuits. Not ask. Tell. Poor Stephanie, who is understandably anxious about her job, does as told. And then Gabrielle made a fuss about the packets of butter not being soft enough, despite Stephanie explaining that all the butter was kept cold for safety reasons. Gabrielle made a snide remark how Stephanie couldn't wait 5 extra minutes to let the butter soften to then bring it to her, which made Stephanie tear up, and me about ready to tell Gabrielle to go F a French chef if food was that important to her. Number 3. When our meals did arrive, Gabrielle was quiet during the meal, not making any comments. I was unsure what was going to happen as a result. Either she really liked it, which I doubted, seeing as I've never seen her compliment anyone's cooking, or she was planning some nasty barb, which I feared. When Mary dropped off the bill, Gabrielle took it before Dad could, and she said she was paying. Because I was sitting next to her, Gabrielle left a big fat 0 in the tip line, and she left a note saying, "It's cute that American chefs think they're good cooks when they've never stepped in a real kitchen before." She then closed the little book the receipt came in, hiding it so nobody else could see what she wrote. I was pissed when I read that note, and I was about ready to slap Gabrielle. I know the chefs and servers who work at this particular diner learn their skills on the job, and if you asked me, they have every right to be as proud of their work as somebody who went to culinary school would be. I took $100 out using the ATM at the diner, and I gave it to the staff as a tip, along with an apology for her behavior, embarrassed and angry. Fortunately, they don't hold it against us, except Gabrielle, and they told me that Mark and I were always welcome back. And this is when I decide I'm going to get back at Gabrielle. The thing is, Mark and I have been binge-watching recipe and cooking videos online, and we've been practicing. And while I don't like to brag, I'd like to say we've become quite good. We know how to smoke bacon, cure corned beef, make creamy scrambled eggs, and bake flaky pastries, and that's just a sampling. When we got home, I told Mark my plan, and he was grinning ear to ear. The next day, while Gabrielle and Dad still slept, Mark and I got up early, and we got right to work. We prepared scrambled eggs, smoked bacon, biscuits, and a fruit salad. Dad woke up early, and he smelled the breakfast, waking up Gabrielle by saying the kids were making breakfast. Dad came downstairs first, and Mark asked him to set the table. Gabrielle then came down as we were finishing up, and she sits down, not offering to help. Gabrielle then comments how it smells like a restaurant she went to in France, and she couldn't wait to taste everything. Meanwhile, Mark and I just served Dad and our plates before putting everything back. Gabrielle just looks at us confused. I then look at her and said, "Oh, I thought you were going to a French cafe for breakfast. You did write on the receipt at the diner that you thought it was cute that Americans think they're good cooks when they haven't set foot in a real kitchen." At that, Dad looked at Gabrielle, his eyes wide as all the color drained from Gabrielle's face. He then said, "You wrote what?" I then said, "Well, hop to it. Enjoy your French breakfast with your French chefs." Gabrielle's face reddened before she left. I don't know if she was embarrassed or angry, but we were able to have a nice breakfast without her complaining. She did come back after getting breakfast, and she's been nice and quiet all day. I hope she's learned her lesson and Dad grows a backbone. In my opinion, OP should have called her out right there and then for leaving that 0 tip and leaving that stupid message for the staff to read. But I guess not including her in the family breakfast got the message across. I don't know. This person says, "As an aspiring chef myself, I can say this. Nothing gets under my skin like snooty, pompous foreigners who compare everything to their home country. When you go out to eat, unless the food's downright awful, there's no need to pick apart everything the staff and chefs do with a venom-tipped needle. And making the servers, chefs, managers cry is downright unacceptable. She needs to go. OP, your dad needs to boot her out of his life. And if she likes French food so much, then she can catch the next boat back to France." Okay guys, so this just happened a few days ago. I work at a hospital as a room service ambassador, somebody who delivers the food. One day, I found out while I was off that a Karen was admitted to the hospital. The woman was supposedly very rude, and she demanded 5 entrees on her tray, 4 sides, and 3 desserts on each meal tray. She would throw the whole tray on the floor, and she would loudly complain if there was even a packet of sugar missing. One day, she made one of my fellow ambassadors cry. So when I heard of this, I had to see this for myself. I decided that I would deal with serving her from now on. Well, after testing around and forgetting an orange juice on her tray, she threw the tray right on the ground in front of me. See, I was in a contact room, which meant we had to wash our hands, gown up, and glove up. Not only that, but we had to ask for her name and date of birth. The reason being is if we give the patient the wrong tray, it could kill them. It also checks if they can remember their name. So with that, malicious compliance mode engaged. Well, I saw this as an opportunity and I brought her up another tray, this time syrup missing on the tray. I gowned up and gloved up, slowly, in front of her door so she could see me. I then went in and with my best ambassador voice and a big smile, I said, "Name and date of birth, ma'am," which she grunted annoyed and she said her name and date of birth. Then I said, "Do you want the tray over you or on the side?" She then said, "Over me, you idiot," so I complied and did so. The woman saw the missing syrup and she throws the tray on the ground. I then looked and said, "Oops, I forgot the syrup. I'll get you another tray." So I went and I got her the same tray, of course, but without the pepper on it. I went up, put the gown on, and then slowly turned towards her with a smile. I then said, "I'll be with you shortly," and then gloved up. That's when I said, "Oops, I forgot to wash my hands." I then proceeded to take off the gloves and gown, and then went to wash my hands, went back, and put the gloves and gown on again. And I could see the fury in her eyes when I went inside her room. I said, "Name and date of birth, ma'am." That's when Karen says, "You just asked me that question, you idiot. You should know by now. Give me the damn food." That's when I say, "I can't give you the tray until you give me your name and date of birth." The woman said fine and gave me the info. She then saw that the pepper was missing, but she didn't say anything after that. Then I said, "Do you want it over you or on the side?" She said over, so I did. And then I said, "Have a good morning." The woman never complained about her trays again. I have many other stories, but this one I'm most proud about. You know, with the way Karen was speaking to OP, she should have had the food trays thrown at her. Like, the audacity of that Karen, right? I just don't get how people can be in a place like a hospital where they need to be cared for and still be so rude. And this person comments what a lot of people are thinking. This person says, "Seriously, if you throw your tray on the ground, I guess you weren't hungry and you're not eating this morning." Many years ago, I worked at an AutoZone. If you've never worked in one, here's what you need to know about it. The customers are rude. I would say things like, "Hi, how are you today?" And they would reply, "1995 Chevy truck alternator." Customers think they know everything about cars. They don't. Customers are also jerks. They would buy the wrong part, kick it around the dirt in their driveway for an hour, and then return it and demand their money back. My particular store also had a problem with the AC, so it was constantly a sweatbox. After 6 months of this, I wasn't a nice guy anymore. One day, a man comes in looking for a spark plug for this old dirt bike. Now, motorcycle plugs are hard to match, since our database is limited, and so is our stock of plugs. So I make my best effort. I say, "Do you have the old plug with you? I can cross-reference the number on the old plug and I can find a match." At that, the guy says, "No, I just need a plug." I tell him, "Yes, sir, I want to be sure to get the right one for you. Do you know the make and model of the bike?" He then gives me the make and model, but our system doesn't have information on the bike, so I've got no way of finding the right plug. Meanwhile, this customer is becoming more insistent, telling me he just needs a plug. They're all the same. So I pull out my phone and try to look up the part number online. No luck. I then ask the guy if there's anyone at home who can pull the plug out and just give us the part number. At this point, the customer's had enough of me trying to help him. He barks, "Just give me a damn spark plug. I don't have time for this." Now, I had enough of sweating in this store and being treated like an idiot by jerks. I just wanted this guy to learn a lesson. I then turned to the rack of the plugs behind me and I grabbed the first one on the top left. Since they were sorted by number, it was a plug that would fit a 1960s Chevy V8. The thing was twice the size of anything that might fit on a dirt bike. I then hand it to the customer and I say, "This will not work. The cash register is over there." and then went to help the next customer. I should also mention that this was a store in the country. It wasn't unusual for a customer to drive an hour to get to us. Several hours later, the guy returns, tail between his legs, and with the old spark plug. He then says to me, "You were right, it didn't fit." So I take the old plug, cross-reference that part number, and then sent him on his way with the right part. Hopefully, the extra round trip taught him to be a little more respectful next time. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where a Karen lets her daughter rob OP, and the story is absolutely wild. Go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.